Hey there. So the new moon in Gemini is fast approaching. We've got some amazing astrology going on in the lead up to it. I'm recording this on the 4th, where Venus and the Sun are currently in an exact cazimi, really in the preparation for this particular new moon, where Venus is actually in a conjunction with the Sun and the moon on that particular day. We've also got the Jupiter and Pluto trine that has been really strongly creating a shift in influence, I've noticed in the last few days. In fact, I was sent this little snapshot of news with a little comment from an astrologer friend, a really good astrologer friend, who said, Jupiter trine Pluto. The whole idea being that that Jupiter spreads ideas far and wide, and that Pluto has to do with the control of everything. I mean, in fact, actually, if we go back to the start of the pandemic and the phenomenon of it, it couldn't have happened had Jupiter not been in a conjunction with both Saturn and Saturn and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. Pluto, of course, he likes to have control of everything. The whole idea of Pluto is that he creates the complete change, and he's got that in his hands. And anytime a human really thinks they have their own say, their own will, Pluto kind of stops them in their tracks. You know, he is the megalomaniac of the of the solar system, as far as I can see. So he really wants to play things at a very sort of absolute level, in particular with the themes of death and dying, reincarnation, the death of saving lives against a killer disease, all very Plutonian ideas. And the idea that something gets done to people, you know, so people are, you know, being infected willfully, or are they being injected willfully? You know, the idea that there is something outside of ourselves coming in to affect us. That's a very Plutonic idea, I think. And Jupiter is just there to amplify that message. Of course, you know, this is a very strong trine, and one of, you know, like every time Jupiter and Pluto come into an aspect to each other, I think we are going to get reverberations and new iterations of the pandemic phenomenon. It's going to sort of vibrate out. They're like little ripples on the pool. That Jupiter-Pluto combination will be reverberating throughout our history, our future history, let's say. So yeah, fascinating times that's leading up. Of course, there are also, you know, mega stories. I mentioned this, you know, obviously there's a lot going on right now in American politics, you know, with vast swathes of population reacting in very different ways. And given that Pluto also represents other people, like if you think Pluto, he's one of the rulers of Scorpio. Scorpio is the 8th sign of the zodiac. There's a 8th house energy about it. If you think of Scorpio, it's known for everything that people don't want to talk about. It's known as one of these signs that kind of darkens the zodiac somehow. You know, I personally love the sign of Scorpio, but you know, it's got this reputation of always going into the dark side. And so, of course, you know, Pluto, one of the rulers of Scorpio, has this kind of unsavory reputation, you know, because he brings up the dirt that nobody wants to deal with. And he brings up stuff about financials, in particular, financials using other people's money, which again is an 8th house theme, definitely about taxes, anything that's hidden, anything's been kept secret, all of these little stories, these little bombshells of hidden stories that come up to be revealed, obviously very much du jour at the moment. You know, they are absolutely on trend, and Jupiter is there to make it go far and wide and to add a touch of, in some cases, celebrity. I'm sure there's going to be lots of celebrities talking about it. What interests me is, you know, the Trump story is obviously a lot about money, but also about power. And I think to the casual onlooker, which I am, many thousands of miles away, it does also, from our media, look like there is the energy of making an example of him. Now, I'm just talking about how it seems to me. I'm not saying whether it's justified or not, or even if it's actually happening. But to me, it does look like there's this almighty power battle. So to me, it looks like there's this legal situation which has been highlighted to make an example of the bad orange man. And then there's this huge power shift that I can also see, that the funds raised on his behalf are absolutely astounding. Like, was it $200 million has just been fundraised by people who also think there is something weird going on with power. So I'm expecting to hear so many more stories over the coming days and weeks about, that really highlight the Jupiter, which can be sensationalist, and it can grow a story big and wide, and power. And again, I urge you to think about your own power. How is your own power and influence expanding? The danger with the Pluto and Jupiter power grab is we could become absolutely power hungry and find ourselves in situations where we have a lot entrusted upon us, and we take on more and more and more. And so what I think is also going on right now is, how much power are we comfortable with, and how can we feel good with our own personal power? So I think there's a much deeper message. I always think what's going on out there is at some level hitting us as well, and affecting us. And maybe that's why, these stories of powerful icons, whether you like them or loathe them, whether they seem popularist or whether they seem like demonic, there are all these different icons out there absolutely showing us these huge stories, illustrating it all to us. So expect more to do with money. I also think the Tedros thing, interestingly, so this was shared with me, it's time to get aggressive with anti-vaxxers. Big story, obviously. I did search it. I couldn't actually find that quote anywhere, but I only did a quick search. But interestingly, Pluto also has quite a lot to do. If you think of the sign of Scorpio and the 8th house and death and dying, it really wouldn't surprise me that themes of the pharmaceutical, medical, some might say mafia, some might say industry, that there's going to be a lot of news about stuff going on with medical suppression, the hiding of science, the hiding of things, and the big reveals. And of course, Fauci's in court at the moment as well. So lots going on. Anyway, I digress, because this is actually about the new moon in Gemini. But isn't it interesting that this is all running into this? And I think you'll see that it's actually quite relevant. So let's have a look at the original chart. So I'm also going to be looking at this with asteroids, not just asteroids, but trans-Neptunian objects. There's a centaur. And I've also put the Great Attractor in, which is a place that I don't know if there is an actual consensus, but it's this huge energy field that appears to be the strongest energy field in the whole of whatever we consider time and space to be. So the Great Attractor, which apparently is, pulling in all this energy, and pulling in galaxies and affecting time and space. This is actually falling into an alignment with the new moon in Gemini. It's in opposition. So I am going to do that in part 2. Interesting that the Great Attractor is all about power as well. So that is not lost on me. Anyway, let's have a look at this. So the first thing I notice about this new moon in Gemini, well, obviously it's in Gemini. And it is in a conjunction with Venus. Venus is also at 16 degrees. So we've got the sun and the moon at 16. I've said 16 degrees, 17. You can see here on the chart, it says 16, 18. Never mind. And Venus is at 16 degrees, 48. So, I always think the moon and Venus together brings us really into our feelings, where our feelings can get very easily expressed. We are wanting to be quite peaceful. We are wanting to be quite harmonic. We might be a little bit more overwhelmed by things. It's definitely a feminine aspect. And then you've got the sun there as well. Now, new moons are all really representing a new opportunity, this new look at things, this new start, a freshness, a newness. And it's in the sign of Gemini. So it's worth examining where this new moon is happening in your actual birth chart. So for instance, for me, it's happening, if I'm not mistaken, it's happening just in my 8th house. For some of you, it might be in your 3rd. You know, just think about how might you express the beauty of life? How might you express a beautiful new start? So, you know, Venus rules compassion, love, obviously, connection, flow. She's also an abundant energy. She is also very much about getting on. So she is collaborative. She is somebody who connects and partners with people. If you think about the sign of the planet Venus, Venus rules Taurus and also rules Libra. So, you know, if you've got Taurus or Libra ascendant, this is most likely quite a very special new moon for you in particular. Now, you know, Venus, she is, as far as I can see, she is all about gentleness and kindness and peace. So you might choose according to where it is in your chart, and also if you've got anything around 14 to 18 degrees, that will also feed into this particular new moon. But you might think about how you can afford yourself a level of forgiveness, a level of kindness, a level of compassion. So just in the last couple of days, I've realized that I've worked myself to the bone. I've been working quite hard, and, you know, my voice was going, I've been coughing up a lot, and, you know, it's time for a rest. And it's so funny because just as the Venus Cazimi was starting, actually, you know, was I wanting to do something artistic or creative? No, actually what I wanted to do was self-care. And so that's what I did. I just said, okay, yeah, it's time to recognize it's okay to put yourself first. Which I know Venus doesn't sound like it's a put yourself first kind of planet, but from a place of self-love and, you know, kindness and forgiveness to yourself, you know, forgiving yourself for not maybe doing everything you've wanted to do, and just to relax into the flow of life. You know, Venus is very much about flow. She's not about striving. You know, that's more of a Mars energy. Venus is receptive. So it could also be a very good time to, yes, have a goal to do something kind and creative and amazing, but you might want to choose to be receptive in how you're doing it. So, you know, in my current intentions, I'm imagining bringing in some kindness to myself. I'm clearing space in my diary. I'm doing things to activate self-care. But again, you have to look in your own chart and see where it's activating. So that's just one of many themes. Then if we tie in the fact that it's in the sign of Gemini, then it also has some extra meaning. So if we think of the sign of Gemini, it's very much about communications, very much about sharing, very much about friends and togetherness. Gemini is the 3rd sign, and the 3rd house is very much a Gemini house. It's a place where we are social, where we're learning from the social constructs. We are learning from the ideas and opinions and commonly held agreements between your friends, your peers, your cousins, your siblings. It's very much your local environment, you know, how you were raised. So, you know, everything to do with what feels socially secure for you is really, really highlighted. You know, the sign of Gemini is also very, very busy, and it's busy in short bursts. And so it's interested and fascinated with things. I always liken it to a bee or a butterfly collecting nectar from flowers, you know, going from flower to flower to flower to flower. Everything that it sees that catches its attention, it's on it. And then it moves. The moment it starts to bore, the moment there's nothing left, it's off. It doesn't linger. The energy of Gemini moves from place to place to place to place. So, yeah, we are thinking about information being shared, and also the trust that occurs between people. The commonly held agreements are also very strong. The 3rd house and the Gemini energy is also very, I mean, they are different, but there is a similarity in as much as there's this love of learning, there's this love of being informed, a love of absolutely being an expert. You know, they say jack of all trades but master of none. That's more of a Gemini type of energy because they know a lot about a lot of things. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that could be tied into this new moon energy. And so again, if you're wanting to learn something, or if you're wanting to examine how comfortable and secure you feel within your local environment, you might find that this is just the start of a new season, you know, until the next new moon. So a month, whereby you're a lot more social, you're in and out of different things. I've got lots of Gemini friends, and so this is the start of a birthday season for me, where I'm out visiting, and so on and so forth. So yeah, a lot of different themes going on there. Geminis are light, and they are fascinated, and they're curious, and they're attracted to lots of bright, interesting colors and textures and things like that, very much like the butterflies and bees. So allow yourself to be fascinated by things. Don't linger. The energy is to keep on moving, which is very much a Mercury thing, who has energies to do with travel. And obviously Mercury is the ruler of Gemini. Now, there's also other things going on, playing into this energy that's worth exploring. Now, the next thing that really catches my attention is this really great big square to Saturn. Now, Saturn's at 18 degrees in the sign of Pisces. Now, it's interesting. When Saturn went into Pisces, a lot of one of our famous astrologers in the UK, who actually died just as Saturn came into Pisces, but she was known as Mystic Meg, and I think one of the titles at that time was the death of Wu, as Saturn came into Pisces. Like, Saturn's a bit of a serious character and really wants to understand the parameters of things. It's quite sobering. Saturn is about structures and building structures and understanding things, and also being in charge. He's a bit of a Billy No Mates. He's quite happy not having friends necessarily, unless they're friends in high places. This is an energy that is paternalistic, an energy that naturally gets to the top because it's resourceful, it's responsible. It can be argued that the Saturn, too much of that Saturn energy can be a bit boring and a bit stifling. It stops creativity. Saturn's rules are kind of anti-creativity, really. Now, when Saturn went into the sign of Pisces, like the death of Wu, the idea that Wu or anything magical was dying because Saturn was going to go in and steal everyone's magical wands and things, and say pixies don't exist and not a fairies, and like the whole idea of Saturn is a bit of a buzzkill. And in the soulful sign of Pisces, some people are saying, yes, it could be a time when people lose the magic of being alive, lose the magic of spirituality. I take a slightly different view. I think that can happen. I also think Saturn can strengthen anything that is spiritual, that's unusual, that's ethereal, that's hard to prove. I imagine things like quantum physics is going to expand during this time. I actually see, when I go on YouTube, I actually see there's lots more people talking about things that are a little bit different, things that are a little bit unknown, a little bit maybe that mainstream ideas have cast aspersions on, and maligned somehow. I actually see there's a strengthening of all these energies that might seem a little bit out there. So yeah, Saturn's interesting. And so you've got this square energy of Saturn in Pisces to Venus, to the moon, and also to the sun. Now, if you're born with any of these, you'll understand some of this energy. So for instance, and I could just talk about the square, but I actually want to include the opposition and a little bit of the conjunction. So, for instance, Saturn and the moon in one of these sort of tight or challenging aspects can sometimes bring a naturally introverted feeling, so particularly people with the moon in a conjunction with Saturn often find it very difficult to express their feelings. So they might bottle their feelings up, and they might try and cool their feelings down, almost step away from their feelings, like partition their feelings a little bit, and try and wrap their feelings up, and also try and manage their feelings in a way that if you had Venus in a conjunction with the moon, you're much more likely to be able to articulate your feelings. Saturn and the sun can confer this very responsible character, this very responsible personality that rises up. Definitely in a conjunction. Now, in the opposition, it brings up quite a lot that brings us more responsibility, funnily enough. And then Venus and Saturn in difficult energies. You know, there is often this feeling of not good enough. I've got Saturn in an opposition to Venus, so I can tune into this quite easily. But it in many respects, I think Saturn dampens the young virgin energy. It dampens the joy of being a woman somewhat. It formalizes things. You know, so I've noticed people with a Venus and Saturn challenging energy often favor a more less feminine style. You know, they tend to try to be more responsible, and so they might be power women or women who go into quite powerful positions and examine that, because again, they're uncomfortable expressing their divine feminine traits. Now, it also can confer loneliness. I mentioned that in response to Saturn and the moon. So I'm expecting at the time of this new moon for us to maybe feel a little bit aware of maybe where we're not connected. So for instance, you might be aware that you're not so connected with your friends or your family. You might be aware of that little bit of distance, that little bit of a cooling off period, that there's just something slightly different. These are the times when we might prefer our own company. So it's quite counterintuitive. Obviously, the sun and the moon and Venus are in one of the most social signs right now. And yet, at some level, we're feeling a little bit, are we good enough? Is there something that people are reacting to? Is that maybe why I sense that there's a cool off? So it's worth exploring. And obviously, if you've got these archetypes, if you are somebody who is more on the shyer end of the spectrum, you might actually find that you feel a little bit shy during this aspect. What it is also doing is in the square, Saturn is also asking us to verify our information. So, you know, one of the things about the Gemini energy is it's sort of encyclopedic. You know, I said, jack of all trades, a master of none. So, you know, and I don't mean to malign the Gemini mind. I know many very deep Geminis who are very, very deep in so many ways. And yet the sort of stereotype of Gemini is that they learn lots of things about lots of different things and don't necessarily go underneath the surface so much. You know, I would always check out somebody's birth chart and would never sort of accuse somebody of being just kind of vacuous and on the surface. But if we were to take the energy of the Gemini, like the sun in Gemini, the moon in Gemini and Venus in Gemini right now, we may well find there's a lot of information coming out. There's a lot of information that is very surface information, surface level. It's because you can't dig and have a short burst of information. And the thing with the Gemini energy is very short, quick, fast. It moves, it keeps moving, and it doesn't want to be tied down necessarily. And so we might find that there are lots of little microbursts of energy, microbursts of socialization, you know, like having friends, hanging out and learning little bits along the way. And yet Saturn here is saying, where's the substance? Where's the deeper meaning? What's underneath it? What is supporting that? And so you might find, like, if you're taking a lot of this information that you're getting from your friends and stuff as read, as fact, as somehow legit, you might choose to also research it. A bit like when my friend sent me that meme to say Tedros is saying it's time to get aggressive with anti-vaxxers. I did a quick search. I couldn't find it. It's not to say it doesn't exist. I'm sure in the way that media is right now, something similar was said and it was twisted somewhat. You know, I think it's very difficult to believe any news we hear, you know, because everything has a bias. And I think this is something that we're going to be kind of suffering a little bit. You know, everything has a bias. I have a bias. You have a bias. And when we're trying to be non-biased, it's still coming from the bias that caused us to want to not be biased. You know, there is always going to be some self-interest and a particular opinion that we here put more emphasis on. And so there are some dangers of this. So I would absolutely say, if you're feeling slightly shyer, slightly more reserved, slightly more, thoughtful, it might be because there's so much information going on right now. You know, you might just be a bit overstimulated, which again is a kind of Gemini thing. So yeah, watch out for that. Something else that I love about this new moon, and as a sort of point of interest, it's really working nicely with the nodes. So whatever's going on right now, it's serving us. The sextile to the North Node is allowing us to move forwards quite gracefully. So it does feel like we are moving, we are evolving, we're not being stopped in our tracks too much. Once we do decide what it is we want to do, we are much, there is a certain level of grace for us to be able to move forwards. I really like the trine to the South Node. It's saying, this is my interpretation of it, by the way. It's reminding us that we already have a lot of the skills and the knowledge that we need right now. We don't really need to go developing new stuff for ourselves. In fact, there's a younger version of us that could really help us right now. So yeah, don't be too keen to rush off into the future. Dawdle a little bit and think, what does this remind me of? There's probably some good clues there. You might find people from the past come up to say hello. So yeah, I just love that. Then we've also got this conjunction. Now I spoke about this in the June update. We've also got this very interesting conjunction. It's not exact now, but we've got Jupiter and Mercury together. In fact, I prefer an 8-degree orb between planets in conjunctions, but I know on certain sites they'll allow up to 10. So we, like Jupiter and Uranus in my mind, they are out of conjunction, but I still think they're pretty close by. We've had quite a phenomenal conjunction that has created a lot of energy, a lot of intuition, a lot of innovation, a feeling of things moving quite fast now. It's almost like for people who were ready for a new adventure, people who are ready to cut themselves loose from a few static opportunities. It feels like things are moving very, very fast. And then seeing Jupiter and Mercury together, both in the sign of Gemini, I really get the feeling that this is a time of great movement, and information is also highlighted. So Mercury is in his own sign. Mercury is absolutely about information sharing, and of course Jupiter is sharing it far and wide. In fact, not that one. Pluto is in a trine to Jupiter, Mercury, and Uranus. So even if they're not all in a conjunction together, Pluto's position is making a trine with all three of them, which is giving them that as a commonality. So, Pluto is in a trine with Uranus, creating this. There's power in looking to free yourself. There is power in liberty. There is power in thinking differently and being ready to go through a major change. Pluto in a trine to Uranus is giving us the power to make some very fundamental changes in our life and to not have the fear of doing it, to value our sovereignty, to value our sense of independence, I think is really strong. And it's giving us a much deeper intuition. It's giving us an idea to access our intuition quite profoundly. Pluto in a trine to Mercury, I also think is quite deep. It's deep thinking, powerful thinking. Thoughts can really create some big change. And of course, Pluto trine Jupiter, which I mentioned right at the start. Whatever is going on with this Pluto energy right now. And if you think Pluto in Aquarius, if you haven't already watched that, you might find it useful, because Pluto's coming out of Aquarius soon, and then we'll be going into Aquarius for the last time on the 19th of November. But, he's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, and Pluto going into Aquarius is going to be transforming all things technological, all things to do with social justice, all things to do with equality and diversity, all things to do with self-identity. It's almost like the boomer generation, which are absolutely all about identifying as themselves and being very proud of being themselves. And, the Pluto and Leo generation are very much learning to express themselves after growing up in the aftermath of world wars. We've now got this Pluto in Aquarius. Similarly, we've got threats of world wars, but there is this idea that the individual is almost like the individual ego is almost the cause of everything that's going on in the world. I almost think that this is the wiping out of individuality. Are we going to be homogenized into one way, and seeing all the censorship ideas and ideologies that have been coming up in recent times. Like, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. If you do talk about that, you are a bigot. I don't run with that. I think everything is valid, and I think it's through conversation and the opportunity to talk about things that we're not quite clear about. That's where we really grow. We don't grow when we're told to sit down in a corner and shut up, and this is the truth. And if you don't believe it, you are some, that's a massive, I've got lots to say on that, and it's probably not the right forum for me to do it. But anyway, Pluto coming into the sign of Aquarius, like, I really do think AI is just going to go crazy. And now that they're in this beautiful trine, he's in a trine to Uranus, which is very technological, Jupiter that spreads ideas far and wide, and Mercury that absolutely will spread it to people, every individual. I see it's just going to go crazy. So again, maybe we do need Saturn here verifying things. But I also have something to say about Saturn and Neptune, because as much as I think Saturn could help us verify facts, I also see that Saturn in a conjunction with Neptune, funnily enough, my friend who mentioned the Tedros story, her and I had a bit of a giggle earlier this year, and we said that the advancing conjunction between Saturn and Neptune was like a portal of distortion, and that anything that was going through this was getting distorted. We noticed earlier in the Pisces, in the tail end of March, that there were lots of stories about things like the royal family, and had anyone seen Kate, and there were all these little stories going around, and then the royal family were announcing these stories and putting photos on their Instagram and stuff, and everyone was like, that's not a real photo of Kate, that's bullshit. So there's all these, there was a whole run of stuff that was clearly fake photos, fake news. It just wasn't, obviously there was something not quite right. So I do think we've got this portal of distortion as well. And I will be talking a lot more about that in the next couple of months. But anyway, this is pretty strong stuff at the moment, and this is the heart of it. The new moon in Gemini, there's information at the heart of it, lots of it coming very quickly, lots of it unverifiable at a time when news can just be created just like that. For shits and giggles, whatever we want to do, we can find a way to make it look really real. So God help us all. If ever there was a time for trusting your own deep awareness and your own intuition, now is that time. And Jupiter in a sextile to Neptune, that energy is still persisting. That is also very, very helpful in terms of our awareness and our intuition. Phew. Right, let's move on. Each time there's a new moon or a full moon, I check it out. I put in the coordinates on serenu.com. It's SERENNU.com. And it will bring up your date of birth, the time, place, and date of whatever time you want to examine. And it will bring it up with like thousands of different points of interest, including trans-Neptunian objects, stars, all sorts of different things. And so when I did the search this time, I noticed that the Great Attractor, which is known to be a central gravitational force out in space, the likes of which none of us can fully experience or articulate or understand. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it, but it just seems to be at the heart of our universe and is pulling universes towards it. It has an effect, that it is absolutely strong and definite and powerful. It's also reported as being like a mirror or a portal or a hologram, that it reflects everything back to us, and that highly sensitive people can really tune into it. Does it have light codes? Is it like a hologram of truth? Does it bend time and space? I'm guessing if it's attracting all known life towards it, then it seems to be. It's also known as having a magnetic pull, and it's an activation point, and it's a point of great truth. So it's interesting that it's in opposition to the new moon. And fascinating. I've just been talking about the idea of what is known, and also that the new moon is representing what is known, but also how it's known. So if you think of the Gemini energy, a lot of things are known from our neighborhoods, from the people around us, through our trusted experience, not necessarily from a deep dive. And so what I really get with this is, the new moon could represent that there is a surface level to everything, but actually there is a much, much deeper truth that almost has nothing to do with what's at the top. They might all actually be polar opposites. So, you could look at all the Trump stories, you could look at the warmongering stories, the stories of the death and destruction that's happening to refugees all around the planet. You could look at all the stories to do with medicine, the need for medicine, the need for united responses and things like that. You could look at all of that and say, wow, that feels really, really relevant. And yet under here, the true relevance of what is true, what is the actual truth of everything, is a million miles away, and is in actual fact in opposition to this. So I wonder what the core truth of everything is. And, like you, most likely I have some ideas of what the truth is. And, for me, when I tune into what I think life is about, it's not about any of this up here. This is just the stories that are being played out collectively between us. I do think there is a much deeper truth to why we're all here, or how we are all here, and what's going on. There's a lot to this new moon in Gemini, a hell of a lot to it. There's something very, very strong in opposition, sort of underpinning it. And I don't know, maybe we're all sick of being at this level of busyness, being at this level of he said this, they said that. Maybe there is something much more fundamental underneath it all. Now, interestingly, there is also asteroid Hopi in a conjunction with the Great Attractor, also in opposition. Now, the Hopi, indigenous tribes, there's lots of different things written about them. And I don't actually know anyone from the Hopi tribe. I've never read up about them. So again, I'm talking about things that I don't have any direct experience of. But when I do some research about the Hopi asteroid and how other astrologers have used it, it's been used to represent attacks, ambush, and minorities, and kind of bad treatment towards minorities. The idea of attacks and ambushes, and how people with a different wisdom are maybe not understood. Also, kind of talking about the sort of dangers of the rationalization of humanity, how bigger fish come along and eat up all the smaller fish. But I'm also interested by the ideas of the sort of Hopi traditions. They had a very sort of different way of speaking. Apparently in their language, they had a different view of time and space, which was reflected in their language, which makes their language very difficult to translate to our languages, which obviously use a particular concept of time. Maybe they are out of time, which is kind of interesting also, that the Great Attractor is kind of out of time and out of space. It represents something very, very different, very, very, very different to us. Could you imagine, there are people out there that postulate, and I think there's probably something in it. Probably is a lie. I do think there's something in it. I'll own my own views. But there are people out there that say that time doesn't exist, that, we get up and we have this, we have the understanding of time, that here is a moment, here is another moment, this is a day, and that each day is a different thing. Each day is a different moment in time. Looking at astrology, we're looking at the movement of the planets, and it looks like everything progressed. But there are people who believe that time is rolling out, like time doesn't exist, and everything is happening at the same time in the same space, and that all realities are possible, and that maybe we are tuned into this particular reality and we can't go beyond it, because the parameters that we have to sense everything keep us in this time matrix, keep us in this time code. So it's interesting, I wonder if something about time is coming up in our consciousness right now, that it is time to understand that time isn't what we've been told it is. So I'm getting a bit far out, getting a bit sort of like wild, I guess. But, the Gemini energy, the sun, the moon in Gemini, and also Mercury and also Jupiter, all in the sign of Gemini, is very much now, rational. If you think about the juxtaposition between Gemini and Sagittarius, the polarity between the two, the energy of Gemini is absolutely, it is like learning at kindergarten and at junior school, infant and junior school. And then Sagittarius is like the university, the doctorate. One of them is local, the other is far out. They are looking at things happening from a completely different perspective. And right now we do have Jupiter and Mercury together. Jupiter's the ruler of Sagittarius, Mercury's the ruler of Gemini. I wonder if something to do with the specifics of Gemini, like the very rational way of looking at things versus the deeply hopeful and expansive and philosophical. I wonder how these two can blend, or whether there is a sort of chasm between them that will bring up some tension, that will create some change. I don't know. But I'm very fascinated by this. I've got my North Node in Sagittarius and my South in Gemini. So I'm always fascinated by this polarity. Okay, so the next one I want to put onto the list is Orcus. Now, Orcus doesn't get much talk. Orcus is a trans-Neptunian object, so she's out in the sort of realms of Pluto, sort of in between Neptune and Pluto. Orcus is seen as the complement to Pluto by many. So if you think of Venus and Mars, you've got Pluto is the Mars, the kind of out there, very potent, very sort of masculine energy that is creating a change in consciousness. I mean, when I've spoken about Pluto earlier, I said he changes everything. And I made it sound like he is a big destroyer of things. And that sounds like he's destroying things for the sake of just destroying them. But I do think that Pluto is destroying things so that you get a much better view of life. Everything kind of gets leveled so that you're building up from the bottom. And actually from that, you realize that you are a lot more powerful than you've ever realized. Pluto levels it all so that you have to start over, and so that you can't rest on, your laurels, so that you can't, you have to survive, and you have to learn in the process of survival. I think that's really what Pluto is showing us. He shows us loads of different ways to kind of destroy you and recreate you so that you are reincarnated, you are coming back to life. And it's very, very visceral. Orcus, by comparison, is like a Venusian version of that. Orcus brings about a complete life change. Orcus can facilitate this beautiful change in awareness and awakening, but it doesn't come from that very physical, visceral kind of I'm going to kill you kind of vibe that you get with Pluto. It's coming through love. And when you create the space for love and the silence for love, like Pluto is known as being quite, like you hear Pluto coming, whereas this Orcus, she's silent. She is quiet. She is just the arm that goes around you. She's like the grandmother, the divine, like a real sort of divine feminine character, smoothing over the actions of Pluto, working hand in hand. And it's, Orcus is reminding you who you are through extreme gentleness, through extreme love. So much love that you probably couldn't actually bear to receive it all. It's so difficult to perceive, like when all of a sudden you have those moments where all of a sudden you feel like your whole body's going to burst open because you've had this like sudden realization of like the love that is available for you. you know, when I've had those moments, it feels like I cannot exist in my human body. It feels like a human body isn't able to process those vibrations, but Orcus is there, you know, changing you through love. So that's interesting as well, that she is, she's almost saying they're there. Yes, the rational world is important. And yes, there is a much deeper meaning. And actually, if you can just stop in love, and yeah, it might be a bit painful, but if you can just stop and take a breather for a moment and create that silence for yourself, then you might hear my vibration. So, yeah, I think this is very, very potent grand square. And of course, the other one is Saturn. I haven't put him down because I've already spoken about him. But Saturn, you know, he is the father to many, and he is the person in charge. He is the person that wants to organize everything. You know, you could say that the great attractor, you know, that is like if I was trying to do the cosmology of this whole new moon in Gemini, to me this is like God. This is like the absolute. Then we've got the mum and the father, like the cosmic mum and the earthly father, and then we've got all us nut jobs running around trying to make sense of the world. And actually, when, you know, like we've got our own busy lives, and then we've got this kind of busyness that's coming over us because of all the different things that are going on in the media, all the celebrities that are now suddenly news reporters as well. Celebrities are now, you know, sharing their version of how things are. We've got all this noise. And Saturn could be like the Tedros, it could be the UN, it could be all these different types of things that are trying to gather us, father us, organize us. And yet there's a much more potent and real force around us. So this is a bit like Star Wars. This is like the story of our life. This to me is a very big new moon in Gemini. And it could blow our ideas of what reality is wide open. I think there's going to be lots of people having sudden recall of things. I imagine people that, you know, I do believe there are people who are here on a purpose, on a mission, you know, people who are here to awaken, people who are here to hold space. You know, you hear all these different ideas. I think there are people here who probably have a multitude of gifts that may just suddenly come online with their gifts. I really sort of intuitively know that as a reality. But again, I don't physically know that. I can't prove that, but that is my sense of knowing, and it might be yours as well. Who knows? But I think this is a very, very interesting time. Now, on top of that, we've also got some other asteroids I do want to mention. Now, this is Chariklo. She's the wife of Chiron. She was another centaur. These are all centaurs in mythology. Another centaur wanted to have a bit of Chariklo. He was very envious of what Chiron had. And she said no means no. And she absolutely refused to be taken off and sexually assaulted. She was very much in her own body, in her own energy force. She absolutely is a devoted healer. She creates a safe space. She's absolutely about, this is my body, this is my sovereignty. She's of graceful service. You know, she absolutely helps people heal. Like, she's a complement to Chiron. So where's Chiron? He's here. Here's Chariklo. She's at 17 degrees in the sign of Aquarius. She's here helping and assisting us at the time of the new moon. She's in a trine with the south node. She's helping the north node into a kite. So we've got some nice energies here. But Chariklo, she is the spiritual kind of energetic space healer. So whereas Chiron was really helping you with your physical insecurities and your physicality, your actual physical body, she was healing your body and the space that your body was in. You know, she was there to help you have a subtle energy shift, and absolutely help you know who you are, help you feel into your space. So I love that. I love that sort of description that there is an energy field out there that we can tap into that gives us that sovereignty in our personal space that goes outside of our body. I love that. And that's absolutely tuning into the new moon energy. Okay, so we've also got Orpheus. I've mentioned Orpheus before. Gifted, talented fella, great musician, prophet. He could see things. He was in a situation where he was about to lose his wife, and he bargained to have his wife returned from the dead. In it, he had to absolutely trust the whole process, and so did she. They both had to trust Hades at his word. And actually, the story of Orpheus kind of is a bit sad, because for all of his gifts, all of his prophecy, all of his amazing, beautiful gifts, he wasn't able to completely trust the situation. And so his lack of trust kind of ruined his life. So I always think Orpheus is, when he shows up, it's about a lack of trust, and how when you don't trust that life is ultimately good, or that something is good, something good is going to come from something, we really lose out. And he's also a message of our talents. Sadly, in his case, his talents weren't enough to change his situation. So it also brings in a certain amount of humility. We've all got talents. We've all got special skills and gifts that we're here to share, and to use, and to delight people with. And yet we cannot just believe that that's all that's needed. We might also need some faith. We might also need some trust. So I like Orpheus here. Interestingly, Amor is also here. Now, Amor is, some astrologers use him to represent the idea of pure love and desire. Amor is also related to Eros and Cupid. There's so much mythology. It's really difficult to pick out all the characters, but like Cupid, the idea that Cupid has these arrows, he fires them off, and then that person absolutely falls madly in love with you. So it's almost like a spell of fated love. So Amor is known to be a complement of Cupid. So it also spells a fated love, pure love, a desire, fated love. So seeing these two together, the idea of love lost with Orpheus, and also this mad desire for love, this slightly wonky love, not necessarily love coming for the sake of love, just for love. It's like love is almost construed. It's almost being manipulated. So with these two in a conjunction together, in a semi-sextile to this new moon, I think there's also a message in there about everyday love. And is it a real true love? Is it love for love's sake? Is it, so we might also have this opportunity to look at the people we love, or look at how we are loving, and to realize, are we doing it on the surface, or are we doing it deep down? I think there's a much deeper need to love, because it's what's flowing from us, rather than that we're under some kind of spell, that we have fallen in love with what we're supposed to love, or who we're supposed to love, or what feels right with sort of narratives and things. Now, obviously, if this is in a strong place in your chart, say from 14 to 18 degrees in the sign of Taurus, you might want to examine it and think what is going on right now in terms of love, and how the new moon could help you with it. I do notice that Orpheus and Amor are also in a trine to Orcus. So the idea of the great loving mother, and the idea that there is this silent witness that is allowing us to change through love and compassion. I think that's a much stronger, compelling version. We've also got Industria that I've also put in. I did look to see if Industria is actually a goddess, but I couldn't find a god or a goddess called Industria. So I'm taking it to represent the wheels of industry and your own industriousness. In this is in a semi-sextile to Gemini. Industry actually kind of works very well with this energy, that we are very, very busy. We're super busy. We're not going to stop. We're really industrious. So I do think it's got energies that are spiking our industriousness. It's this Gemini energy that's always moving, always fascinated and curious by things, could actually really help us if we're wanting to be industrious ourselves. So there's a lot of different things going on. I think the strongest things is that there's something much deeper going on at the moment. So it might be helpful to recognize that whatever we're seeing going on in the world right now is absolutely surface level. And to me, I think when we see stuff being reported in the news, and then, all these chat shows and stuff, talking with their views and their talking heads and stuff, it's almost like they're trying to get us into the story. It doesn't feel like anyone's trying to reveal, create respite for us or help us get into peace and ease. It just feels like there is a complex, maybe an entertainment complex, a news entertainment complex, that are wanting to create panic and trauma, wanting to create this absolute buy-in to every single story. And yet what I really see with the astrology, and I do admit I have my own bias, I want to stand up for the idea of peace and love and truth and the deep knowing of it, not the surface level. But to me, the meaning of this new moon is, yes, we can create lots of change and it can be very, very busy. And yet there's a much deeper pull for us to allow some of this stuff out. And when you think Venus is in the conjunction with the sun and the moon, which is compassionate, it's self-care, self-love. And then there's Orcus, that's also about self-care and absolute love that can transform your life, like letting go of everything that we've ever believed, because we trust in life and we can trust in love. And then Orpheus, he lost everything because he couldn't trust or have faith. And that was over love. And then we've got Amor as well. So to me, it feels like there's a lot of energy asking us to trust and look at the deeper meaning in parallel to Saturn, that is asking us to get very rational, and to the very sort of high-end Gemini energy that is busying us and creating this sense of can't stop, got to keep moving. So take of it what you will. I hope this is helpful in understanding some of the patterns. See how they fit in your own chart. These are really interesting times. I think lots is changing right now, and for me, self-care is absolutely what I think is going to keep us going through these times, so that we can go through these times without losing our mind. Which reminds me of the phrase that I heard in a client meeting the other day, which was, have I lost my mind? Am I out of my mind? I'm saying, are you out of your heart? And I think this new moon absolutely epitomizes it. Get back in your heart, stay in your heart, and observe the world from the heart. I wonder what the heart would say right now, as the heart is looking at this. All of these stories, if we were to analyze all these stories on the news and the media and stuff, and then you asked your heart, like, what do you make of this? And I think the heart would say that story is about fear. Someone's got unresolved fear here, and anyone with unresolved fear is going to react to this story. This story here is about betrayal. This story here, and it's all about stories of loss and stories. Like when we look at these high-end stories, we get linked into them because there's an aspect of us that can put ourselves in that person's position, or imagine ourselves in these stories that are being described to us. And I think the heart would say to us, this is what you've got in it. This is why you're in this story. And your heart would just say, it's hurt, it's loss, it's fear. And what would love do right now is the other big question. So I'm going to leave that with you. I hope you're having a marvelous life and that things are working out for you beautifully. Just before I do go, I just want to say thank you, a really sort of heartfelt thank you to everybody that supports the channel, everybody that sends encouraging messages to me, anyone that sends donations. It all makes such a difference. So thank you so much. But anyway, have a great new moon, and let's keep an eye on all these messages. And I wonder what is lurking underneath them. I wonder what the real truth is, and I wonder what the heart would say. But anyway, lots of love to you. Take care. Bye for now.